Good morning, members. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start. So I will say that we carry on with the election of the House Committee Chairman. So let's continue with the first joint debate. Mr. Kenneth Leung, Ms. Claudia Mo, and Mr. Charles Mok have proposed non-binding motions. Ms. Tanya Chen. I'd like to raise a point of order. Before you deal with the motions, I noticed that this afternoon we are going to have a meeting, but then that's not for the election of the chairman as well as the deputy chairman. And the meeting will run from 2:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I think you have also noticed that on the 4th of May, the President, Mr. Andrew Leung, issued a document, namely a legal advice written up by two SCs. And according to Mr. Leung, the President, and I have also read the legal advice, according to Mr. Leung, it is to be kept confidential, but then he would allow House Committee members to quote from that legal advice. So I have with me this letter from Mr. Leung. So I'm going to quote from Mr. Benjamin Yu, SC, and Mr. Jenkins Shun, SC's legal opinion. Well, I would like to say that the information therein is directly related to our election, which we are going to conduct. So my question is, first of all, whether we'll have the opportunity to have a full discussion of the legal opinion, and probably House Committee members have also received a copy of our legal advice commissioned by 22 Pandems. In brief, the legal advice was given to us by, or written by, Mr. Philip Dice, SC, and Jonas Chen, SC. And there's a response to Mr. Benjamin Yu, SC's legal advice. So, first point, if the legal advice is directly related to the election, and since, presiding member, you are going to conduct the election, you need to proceed with this matter. Secondly, in relation to the afternoon meeting, I doubt very much whether we can discuss the relevant issues. If not, if we have time in the afternoon, we should continue with the election of the chairman instead of dealing with other matters. I think this is consistent with the legal advice given by our own legal advisor earlier on. So on these two matters, presiding member, please rule on them. This is because the rules of procedures are related to the election of the chairman. So please rule on the relevance and then give us clear directives as to how we are going to deal with the PM meeting. If we are to proceed with other matters, will it be unlawful, and which will also render the outcome of the discussion unlawful? I think Ms. Tanya Chen has indeed raised a point of order. I noticed that many members would like to speak on this point of order. I will urge you to press the button request to speak, and many of you have already done so. 2 minutes each, please, because we have a tight schedule. Dr. Kiki Kwok. Thank you, presiding member. All of them are points of order, so why don't you press the button request to speak? Thank you, presiding member. Well, give me the floor. I think it is indeed worrying. We have got before me 3 pieces of legal advice. First of all, one from our own legal advisor. Second, Mr. President, Mr. Andrew Leung, not a member of the House Committee, sought advice from outside counsel. And then 22 members asked two SCs to come up with a report on their legal advice for us. Presiding member, What's important is that we have read all the legal advice, in particular that written by Mr. Philip Dice SC and Jonas Chan SC. It is quite clear that any discussion at a meeting of the House Committee meeting would only be about the election of the chairman before we can move on to other matters. I noticed that Mr. Lee, the House Committee chair, has called a House Committee meeting, but then that's not about the election of the chairmanship. I have already read through the legal advice from Mr. Philip Dice and Jonas Chan. According to the rules of procedures, any House Committee meeting can only deal with the other outstanding issues after completion of the election of the chairmanship. I would say the following. If anybody is to depart from the rules of procedures, whatever is done and whatever the decision is taken, they will be challenged. And I'm of the opinion that it is not going to do any good to our House Committee business in future. Claudia Mo, a simple one. It isn't just about election of the chairman and the deputy chairman. It is also a matter of the public's right to information. All out of a sudden, the people of Hong Kong were surprised. That is, Mr. Andrew Leung, the president, got a piece of legal opinion that would upset our rules of procedures. Our own legal advisor has already given us her opinion, and then the pandemics themselves also got their own legal advice, basically that is in agreement with the earlier legal advice of the legal advisor. So it's a matter of 2 against 1. How do we carry out our business? Can you dismiss it saying that it is not of our concern? But indeed it is. The basic law does say that we need to oversee how public money is being spent. I want to know how much money has been spent by Mr. Andrew Leung to get the legal advice of Mr. Benjamin Yu SC. Now, you are the presiding member. You have to make a ruling on this matter. Thank you. Next, Mr. Gary Chan. Thank you, Member Kwok. As you have said, for today's House Committee meeting, we have to carry out the election of the chairmanship. Now, for you to deal with the motions, for you to deal with the points of order and the so-called the legal advice for the afternoon meeting, I think you have been acting ultra virus. So you must go back to the election process ASAP. And in fact, Mr. Benjamin Yu's legal advice has already been accepted. So it is not a matter of 2 against 1 as mentioned by Claudia Mo. That's not the case. I think you need to follow the rules of procedures and you need to elect the chairman accordingly. In the afternoon, the incumbent chairman, Mr. Lee, will deal with our normal business. There will be an opportunity for 2 sides to have a debate on their respective legal advice. At this moment, I don't think it's the right time to have such a debate. We should immediately go into the electoral process for the chairmanship. Yes, of course, everybody would like to move on to the election. But then there are still a dozen of members who have pressed the button to request to speak. I need to respect the members' requests. Dr. Priscilla Leung. Wednesday last week, presiding member, I wrote to Mr. Lee. I asked her to follow our rules of procedures. That is, we should only devote 15 minutes of each HC meeting for the purpose of election of chairman. And we should uphold public interest, quite unlike Claudia Mo and KK Kwok's assertion. They are saying that they want to monitor the government's performance. Well, in fact, we have to carry on with our normal business. Dr. KK Kwok said that whatever decision is to be taken, it may stand a chance of being challenged by way of judicial review. Everybody has the right to do so. What about what about the case in relation to Justice Zhang and involving Mr. Justice Zhang, Wang Yukman, and Liang Xing? I think you know that the court would respect us, and for the sake of public interest, we should allow Mr. Li to discharge her duties. And then you have got your legal advice. President Andrew Leung has also got his legal advice. Well, I think you can always come up with 100 pieces of legal advice against 100 pieces of legal advice. Ultimately, it is up to Mr. Li, the chairwoman of the House Committee, to rule on it finally. Next, Mr. Martin Liao. Thank you, presiding member. In fact, it is arguable as to whether you can deal with such points of order, but I won't pick up an argument with you here. Just now, Tanya Chen raised a point. I don't think there's a point of order because that's about the meeting called by the incumbent House Committee chairman in accordance with the ROP. So I don't think it is related to this meeting, and therefore you have no power to make a ruling. We have only got one item on the agenda for this meeting, election of the chairman, so I will invite you to come back to the agenda ASAP. For the legal advice that you mentioned, yes, we can have a discussion. There will be ample time this afternoon. I believe that the legal advisor will also be present, and the HC members who are non-lawyers can also raise issues with the legal advisor. For the 22 opposition camp members, they have got a legal advice. There's no need for a discussion. Presiding member, if you agree with that legal advice and you're willing to accept the consequences, you could have acted in accordance with that legal advice and preside over the election, and there's no need for a discussion. But of course, you need to bear the consequences, whatever they are. Thank you. Next, Mr. Kim Yun. Well, we should have one House Committee meeting. Surprisingly, there's another meeting to be called. This morning, you will be presiding over the meeting. In the afternoon, another committee member will be chairing that meeting. Will there be any connection between the meetings? And are we talking about having another House Committee altogether? No. Our legal advisor earlier on gave us her legal advice. The House Committee adopted her formal legal opinion, and we spent a few months' time to act in accordance with that legal advice. Now, all out of a sudden, we have been given legal advice from an outside council or from two outside councils. Without any discussion, it is said that it has been given agreement, and Mr. Li said that she accepted it. And then in the afternoon, we are going to change the convention that we have adopted for a few months. In other words, is it tantamount to a new round of reinterpretation? In fact, not interpretation of the rules of procedure. It's a change of the way we do things. If it is said that it has been agreed upon, why? Don't you think it's right for it to come back to this House Committee meeting for discussion and to be adopted and accepted by the Council as a whole? What is being done is a grab of the power, and I don't think it is acceptable at all. Next, Ms. Alvin Yeung. Allow me to respond to Martin Liao. That is why it is the right time for us to discuss what we are talking about. This is because Sarah Lee called a meeting for the afternoon, but then it is not the right thing to do, and there is also a conflict of interest. For Benjamin Yu's legal advice, he also talked about potential conflict of interest. he's using a non-legal term to say that it is the lesser of the two evils. But then Philip Dykes has already rebutted his opinion. It is not a matter of legal points. Now, for many of you on the other side, you are also legally trained and you can have a look. Now, if Steri Lee thinks that she has the power to deal with urgent and essential business, Benjamin Yu didn't actually draw the line, so it is blurred and it is vague and it is dangerous. In the afternoon, Steri Lee is calling a meeting. We don't know why she's saying that it is urgent, it is essential. Now she's calling this meeting. Are you saying that it's fine? She's a contestant for the post. She's direct conflict of interest. And you allow her to call a meeting in the afternoon? Does it mean that none of you knows what is meant by conflict of interest and so you allow her to do so? That's the crux of the matter. And then here we have got this Benjamin Yu's legal advice. Where does it come from? From Andrew Leung. Who does he represent? And what about the money that he's spending? Maybe behind closed doors, he has asked for your opinion, but not the 22 of us. Now the opinion is out, Steri Lee agrees with it, then all of a sudden a meeting is called in the afternoon. Well, it is exactly because of this we have to discuss the matter here and now.
Mr. Eddie Chu. Mr. Gary Chan just now claimed that the legal advisor supported the legal opinion of Benjamin Yu SC, which illustrate what happened in Electrical. I mean, you play the player and a referee, and you usually have got insider tips up. So you're already acting in cahoots with the legal advisor and the Chinese liaison office. So that's our current state. Second, the public must need to know what's going on. If in this afternoon that Steri Lee can call and convene a meeting to discuss matters unrelated to the election of the chairman of the House Committee, so she as a candidate would not need to be elected as the chairman of this new session and still will confer all the powers of the House Common chairman. What does that mean to the public? That the loyalists would like to cancel scrap the election for the chairman. Why do we need to discuss this? For over a few months, the Steri Lee herself knew that she only had the authority in setting a time for Dennis Kwok to preside over the chairman election, and today is no exception. And this morning, the Dennis Kwok must sort this out, and the meeting convened by Steri Lee, if we couldn't haven't sorted out the chairman election procedure in the morning, shouldn't we use the 2:30 to 7 o'clock time to continue with the chairman's election? That would Mr. Dennis Kwok need to make a ruling. Next, Dr. Cheng Chung Tai. Mr. Gary Chan. The remarks made by Mr. Chu contain wrong information. The legal advisor concur with the Benjamin Yu SC's legal opinion. Was also had a piece of information when we spoke to the press yesterday at 11:30 yesterday. Maybe Mr. Chu hadn't woke up and unaware of this. Dr. Cheng Chung Tai. I'm not a legal professional. There's a viewpoint legal. Well, there's from the common sense perspective, we can have a legal debate. I couldn't see how a incumbent HG Salmon taking part of the election that couldn't have a conflict of interest. Well, let me set an example. Now that we have the election of the chairman, she claimed to hold a meeting in parallel to continue with the legislative process for the national anthem bill, and so for those and for that and on this bill, the members will either agree, object, or abstain. while she would deal with the national the national anthem bill, how did that not affect her support for as a election to be chairman? Well, the conflict of interest aside, I couldn't understand the practice when it comes to outside legal opinion. When it was received by the council president, while it comes to the ROP is concerned, there's no way that would not first handled by the ROP committee on the ROP. And as barrister claimed that you should do so and so, and we should have and the House Committee must adopt the suggestions. Is that the practice? They really explain why the Council President would have the authority to directly instruct the House Committee and bypass the CROP and not having to deal with the point of orders. I don't understand why this question has not been raised. Dr. Junius Ho. Well, Mr. Member, so looking at the opinion provided by Philip Dykes and others barristers in the Para G, let's not bother with all the fuss. On page 16, just get along with the election instead of all the hand-wringing. Well, you should have conducted the election like a presiding member should. Well, all this business unrelated to the election, and you actually talk about the security arrangements, you are really going on an tangent indefinitely. There's abusive procedures. Well, speaking of the conflict of interest, well, now that the House is an impasse for her to take on the role of the chairman of any conflict of interest, because not really acting on herself, she had took an oath of serving all of Hong Kong, and you stated why we put it in the impasse because we want to block the national anthem bill. So that's your personal desire overriding the Hong Kong collective interest. This is exactly abusive procedures in conflict of interest. Why do you see that the passage of the national anthem bill would affect the interests of yourself and Hong Kong people? That signified a very bad intention on your part. So we have two legal opinions, and of course we should stick to Benjamin Yu, because he's a lot more smarter. Philip Dykes, just go away. Well, it's pointless for you to carry on because you're being blasted for all sides. You're breaching basically all Article 104. Well, you have been lucky if I were the chief executive. You'll be an OUT'd or voted out. Well, I already criticized you on past HC meetings of overstepping your powers and capable of presiding this chairman election. Well, the public now crystal clear that after so many meetings, you're still abusing the procedures and also on the point of order. So what do you want? Would you continue with this to let the public know that in order to object the national anthem bill, you would not allow the chairman election to proceed? I don't see that you will enter the election procedure today anyway. Now that we have the legal opinion that expounded very clearly, you are overstepping your powers. That your only power is not asking you to comment on the point of orders, but instead to enter the election for the chairman. I hope you can respect yourself and this legislature and the will of the Hong Kong people. It should stop overstepping and enter the election right away. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tam. Just now, Dr. Ho remarked, I wonder if they miss remarks or quote things out of context. As said in Para 28, if Starry Lee wished so, she could withdraw the nomination and drop out of the race. Then she could would chair the meeting. And the Para 30 how do we get a better way forward than the lesser of two evils? From the outset, we see that the stereo lamp is not able to preside to transact other business of the HC besides the setting of the meeting date. While the establishment can simply know how to push buttons, and all of a sudden, and so you've been activated by the statements made by the two officers. So instead of just pressing buttons, you just simply jump you jump the fuse, and now you go on the aggressive but resort to every excuse so that you can put Mr. Lee back to the chairman seats. So have you finally woke up for this good part of your slumbers? Now that you've been working from the hibernation and you put on a good show, while the Chinese liaison officer is watching, and also the Hong Kong Macau office, put in more acting chops, because you have to do your role, and even extras, movie extras, when have their character, you should act more agitated. Promise me. Okay, be more expressive. Because two officers are watching. You're not demonstrating to the Hong Kong people, but just showing it to the two officers. For the good part of the year, you're finally go on a tantrum. Well, please don't yell from your seat. Next, Mr. Ray Chan. Well, Mr. Kwok, we are facing two questions. But first, to tell to all questions, we have two fresh legal opinion. Well, for these two fresh legal opinion have to do with the election of the House Committee. If so, then Mr. Kwok continue to preside over the meeting. If they're irrelevant, we should not deal with them. Or only after the chairman and deputy chairman have been elected, instead of Mr. Lee to call their own meeting to deal with this. And according to the Benjamin Yu's legal opinion in the second paragraph, Andrew Lam have only disclosed a part of the argument favorable to them, and chose not reject those unfavorable to him. Well, was that unfavorable put Andrew Lam or to the lawyer's camp? However, the legal opinion was paid with taxpayers' money. I wonder if the other pandemics are aware of that. And when Sterry Lam, can you please account to the public that are you aware that what are the rejected portions of the Benjamin Yu's opinion? And how could some members would have the privilege or the priority to get hold of a copy of the legal opinion? Well, they're all being paid with taxpayers' money. It's not that they're paid with their own money. Well, it's all to do with the chairman election, and Sterry Lam had a severe conflict of interests and role conflict. The Sterry Lam should not sit on the chairman's seat in the afternoon to the overall meeting. Well, you can convene a meeting at your own home, but it should not within the meeting time of the House Committee. I know they're aware that a lot of members would like to speak. I will extend the meeting for 30 minutes. Next, Mr. Leung Ji Chung. Well, if we elect the chairman, we don't have all this fuss. You have deferred the election for over 6 months. Well, we want to defer it till the whole legislature term is over. Whose responsibility is it? Well, Mr. Kwok, the presiding member, is squarely yours. And some other took advantage. Could create the scene to the afternoon and claiming the afternoon meeting is illegitimate, and that. While there may be difference in legal opinion, however, you could not destroy the electrical institutions. The president have consulted outside legal opinion, and the incumbent HC chairman will decide which opinion she will adopt. If you attempt to ram it through, the public will have a backlash. And Jeremy Tam claims, and some members have suddenly went off. I see you're the one that went up the most. Well, you are showing it for Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State. Make sure you speak louder and make sure you go jumping up and down. then the dog biscuit will arrive.
我喺位上。
Members, please do not yell from your seat. Next, Mr. Kenneth Leung, presiding member. Just 2 points. First of all, when Gary Chan quoted that our president said that the Secretariat has accepted Benjamin Yu's legal advice, I don't know why it took 6 months for the advice to be taken. Nothing has changed for the past 6 months. Well, what about the independence and integrity of our legal advisor? She's a legal profession. No. And I want to know if she has been subject to visible and invisible pressure and therefore she accepted the legal advice. I want to know the logic. I want to know the reason. The 2 pieces of legal advice are totally contradictory. I want to know why there has been such a change within a few hours' time. The legal advisor, the Secretariat, served the entire council. So this is a serious problem. And then many pro-establishment members said that Philip Dai's advice and Benjamin Yu's advice should be compared. So whose opinion should carry more weight? Of course, to me, it is beyond doubt that it should be Philip Dai's. Now, if you go back to Philip Dai's opinion, I think the main point is that for the incumbent HC chairman, there is the need to consider the potential conflict of interest. Well, please go to paragraph 20.
Her power by prolonging or delaying the process of election, so that she remains in office as the HC chairman. 呢個好確定係有一個。
So it is quite sure that there is this possibility of abuse of power and abuse of procedures. Thank you. Next, stability. Presiding member, citizens, members. Well, it is quite common that lawyers have different opinions. I'm going to call a meeting in the afternoon. Well, it is in accordance with the powers given to me by the rules of procedures and House rules. If the chairman has not been elected, it is quite clear from the rules that I will still be in office until a new chairman has been elected, and the powers that have been given to me have not been eroded or taken away from me. I also respect the opinion given to me by the Legal Service Division. I need to call a meeting so as to deal with and listen to your views concerning the different legal opinions. Now, for the House Committee, for a long time, has not been able to deal with quite a large number of bills. Ray Chan said that I sort of created that meeting. No, that's not true. I have acted in accordance with the House rules and the ROP. If you say that I haven't done anything according to the rules, please point out the basis of your argument. Now, if this morning we are able to elect a chairman, then in the afternoon, the newly elected chairman of the House Committee will be chairing the meeting, or even decide on the agenda that I have set out is proper or not. I haven't taken part in the electoral process because it is entirely up to Mr. Kwok, the presiding member, and the rest of the members to steer the procedure. So there's no conflict of interest. As long as we can elect a chairman this morning, then everything will be resolved. And there won't be any conflict of roles because the newly elected chairman can then deal with the rest of the agenda. Take a look. Well, presiding member, for 6 months you have no power to deal with such matters. You've been gaming the rules. You are inept. You are abusing the powers. The public are clear about this. You and your allies and the opposition camp on different occasions have admitted that you have got other motives, and they are not good motives. First of all, you resist the smooth scrutiny of the National anthem bill. Elvin Young yesterday said that, and it was quite clear, and he was quite frank, that he would like to force Sarah Lee to give up the candidacy. So it's a farce so as to grab power. I think it is quite clear that you have the motive to disrupt the normal functioning of the House Committee. Elvin Young said that he would like to force Sarah Lee to give up her candidacy. Well, I'm glad to note that you have been addressing Ms. Sarah Lee as the chair lady, and for letters that you sent to her, you also addressed her as the chair lady. So it was quite clear that she's still the incumbent chairman, but then you are still taking up the seat of the chairman on the podium, and you are trying to stir up trouble, stir up antagonism, and you try to gain political mileage in the yellow economy circle, and you have been crowdfunding, and you have got $300,000. Well, Johannes Chan and Philip Dice are of course on your side, so their position are already sort of preempted. So all your arguments are just nonsense. For the past 6 months, you have been putting up a show, and I think it is a clear case that all you have been doing, talking about, is nonsense. So I've learned something new from your speech. Dr. Fernando Cheung, I have to point out to Sarah Lee, you have breached the rules of procedures, namely Rule 75 and also Rule 20 of the House Rules. If you are not clear, please have a look of the joint legal advice written by Philip Dice and Johannes Chan. The point is quite clear. As an incumbent HC chairman, as the chairman from the last session, you have only got one single power. You can chair over the election. As a candidate, you have to withdraw or stay away from the electoral process. For the outside counsel's advice, presiding chairman, I think that is directly related to the election process. This is because their advice points out that Mr. Lee is still the chairman, and she has a conflict of interests. You can go to paragraph F of Annex 2. It says that if the incumbent chairman deliberately prolongs or delay the process, then she can remain in the office. So I would say that this point is directly related to our current process. So, presiding member, you need to rule on the following. That is, whether the outside counsel's advice is in line with the rules of procedures. And then in the afternoon, for Mr. Lee to go on to chair that meeting, I will regard it as her indication to withdraw her candidacy. If she would like to abuse the powers, then she must withdraw from the contest. If we cannot finish our discussion this morning, then, presiding member, you need to continue to chair the meeting in the afternoon. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I will urge Sarah Lee to listen to Fernando Cheung, in particular the 2 paragraphs that he quoted. I don't think she can just choose what the 2 lawyers have said, and then you say that you still have the power to be the chairman, and you can call a meeting and set the agenda. Presiding member, I think everybody needs to understand this point. Other than the 2 paragraphs mentioned by Fernando Cheung, there's also a convention that we have been following. In order to allow the committee to elect a chairman and a deputy chairman, we do allow the chairman from the previous session to call a meeting and to make arrangements. That's our convention. But then we don't give her or him any powers as an incumbent chairman to set any agenda items that go beyond the election of chairman or deputy chairman. That's not what we have been doing as our convention for many years. Now, for Steri Lee, if she starts to do this, it is not just a matter of breaching our rules of procedures. It is also a breach of our convention. Now, today, you may say that it is a very exceptional situation, so we have to deal with it in an exceptional way. But we don't have a rule to cover this. Now, if you say that the outside counsel's advice is of reference value, I think after all, it needs to be given recognition and adopted via a particular procedure instead of just you having the final say. I think it is overstepping and it is sort of departing from all the rules. Mr. Charles Mok, I need to respond to Michael Look's point. Don't insult those who took part in the crowdfunding exercise. They knew full well what's happening here. They dipped into their own pockets to support us instead of you resorting to public money to get your own FCs. Michael Look, did you read Philip Dai's document? Did you also read Benjamin Yu's legal advice in English? Steri Lee, if you have read Philip Dai's opinion, you will be clear that the most important point therein is that there is this role, there's this conflict of interest in relation to you, and the simple solution is for you to withdraw your candidacy. Well, in the interest of time, I will say that this is my opinion. If we take a look of paper LS 11/19 to 20, paragraph 11, it is clear that before the election of the chairman of the HC, the power would be limited to the election of the chairman, and the election of the chairman will always be the first item on the agenda. Yes, I've noticed that somebody has said whether the legal advisor has changed her mind. Let me take a look of paper LS 67/19 to 20, and that's dated the 27th of April 2020. Annex 1, paragraphs 5 and 6 tell us that she maintained her earlier advice. That is, before the election of the chairman, the incumbent HC chairman has only got the power to elect a chairman. She's worried that there may be such a scenario, that is, all other committees like Finance Committee and other panels will also be affected. And there will be a serious possibility of conflict of interest. So I'm not going to read out the paragraph in full. Paragraphs 5 and 6 are clear in relation to her view. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, let me finish first. All right? Well, according to the two papers I mentioned and taking into account the legal opinions, I believe that at 2:30 p.m. when there is a meeting, Mr. Chen Hanfeng, stop yelling from your seat. I am of the opinion that the 2:30 p.m. meeting should be having the election of chairman as the first order of business. The first item on the agenda should still be the election of the chairman, and therefore at 2:30 p.m., if Steri Lee calls a meeting, then in accordance with the rules of procedures, it should be the election of the new chairman. That should be the first item on the agenda. That's my ruling on this matter. Yes, Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Order, please. Order, please. You are abusing the powers. You are overrunning. You talked about the legal advisor's advice. That's April's. She's next to you. Why don't you ask her? Miss Regina Yip, please, we're winding up. Why don't you ask the legal advisor via the clerk? Now, I declare that if we are to have a meeting at 2:30 p.m., we should continue to elect the chairman. For today's meeting, the meeting is adjourned.